Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today, we bring you a developing story that has raised alarms in the East China Sea. Chinese ships near the Diaoyu Islands, stoking Japan's fears of a potential clash with Beijing. Reminiscent of recent tensions in the South China Sea. I'm Richard, and you're watching the US Military Channel. Don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates on geopolitical developments. The Diaoyu Islands, known as the Senkaku Islands in Japan, have been a long-standing source of territorial dispute between China and Japan. The latest escalation in tensions began with the deployment of airborne early warning aircraft and a marine destroyer by Japan, responding to the presence of Chinese vessels in the vicinity of the disputed islands. The Japanese Defense Ministry reported sightings of Chinese warships near the boundaries of Japan's Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ, heightening concerns over the potential for a maritime clash. Analysts suggest that Beijing's recent maneuvers near the Diaoyu Islands are strategic, with the primary aim of undermining Tokyo's control over these uninhabited East China Sea territories. The Chinese government's actions seem to echo its assertiveness in the South China Sea, where it has engaged in maritime altercations with neighboring countries, including the Philippines. This pattern of behavior has not gone unnoticed by Japan, contributing to the escalating tensions in the region. In response to the perceived threat, Japan has taken decisive measures, deploying airborne early warning aircraft for surveillance and at least one marine destroyer to monitor the movements of the Chinese vessels. The deployment of military assets underscores Japan's commitment to defending its territorial claims and maintaining stability in the East China Sea. The question remains, will this response be enough to deter further Chinese actions, or are we witnessing the prelude to a more significant conflict? The presence of Chinese warships near the Diaoyu Islands carries significant strategic implications for the region. As tensions escalate, neighboring countries and international observers are closely watching the situation unfold. The East China Sea has become a focal point for geopolitical rivalries, and the Diaoyu Islands, with their disputed ownership, serve as a potential flashpoint. The international community remains on edge as it contemplates the possible ramifications of a Beijing-Tokyo clash in this sensitive maritime territory. To fully grasp the gravity of the situation, it is crucial to consider the historical context of the Diaoyu Islands dispute. Both China and Japan lay claim to these uninhabited islets, and the historical animosities between the two nations have further complicated the issue. Understanding the historical roots of the conflict provides insights into the deep-seated tensions that continue to simmer beneath the surface. The constant presence of Chinese vessels near the Diaoyu Islands has not only heightened tensions between China and Japan, but has also raised concerns among neighboring countries. The regional balance of power is at stake, and countries throughout East Asia are closely monitoring developments to assess their own security implications. The potential for a Beijing versus Tokyo clash reverberates beyond the immediate parties involved, with far-reaching consequences for regional stability. On Monday, February 5, 2024, maritime tensions between China and Japan have escalated as Chinese and Japanese Coast Guard ships faced off near the Diaoyu Islands in the East China Sea. This incident is the latest in a series of confrontations between the two countries over the uninhabited island chain, which is claimed by both China, known as the Diaoyu Islands, and Japan, known as the Senkaku Islands. The Chinese Coast Guard claims that Japanese vessels illegally entered its territorial waters, while the Japanese Coast Guard states that it maneuvered its ships to prevent Chinese vessels from approaching. This face-off comes just 2 weeks after a similar incident near the disputed islands. The Diaoyu Islands have been a source of contention between China and Japan for many years, with both countries asserting their territorial claims and engaging in frequent maritime confrontations. What is the current status of the territorial dispute between China and Japan over the Diaoyu Islands? The territorial dispute between China and Japan over the Diaoyu Islands, also known as the Senkaku Islands, is ongoing. The uninhabited island chain is claimed by both countries, with China referring to them as the Diaoyu Islands and Japan as the Senkaku Islands. The islands have been controlled by Japan since 1895, except for a period of administration by the United States from 1945 to 1972. The dispute has led to frequent maritime confrontations between the two countries. The latest incident occurred on February 5, 2024, when Chinese and Japanese Coast Guard ships faced off near the islands. The Chinese Coast Guard claimed that Japanese vessels illegally entered its territorial waters, while the Japanese Coast Guard stated that it maneuvered its ships to prevent Chinese vessels from approaching. How have the territorial disputes between China and Japan affected trade relations between the two countries? The territorial disputes between China and Japan over the Diaoyu Islands have affected their trade relations in several ways. Short-term disruptions. At the height of anti-Japanese protests, the disputes have led to short-term disruptions in trade relations between the two countries. For example, Japanese companies in China reported significant losses due to these protests. Bilateral trade. The territorial disputes have not significantly impacted the overall volume of bilateral trade between China and Japan. However, the disputes have led to a shift in the composition of trade, with China becoming Japan's major export market. Japanese investment in China. Japanese investment in China has been running at twice the rate of Chinese investment in Japan. However, the disputes have led to a decline in Japanese investment in China. Air travel. The disputes have led to a decline in air travel between China and Japan, as Chinese tourists have been discouraged from visiting Japan due to the tensions. Economic growth. Both China and Japan have more to lose if the disputes led to a breakdown in normal economic relations. China's growth is more resource-intensive than Japan's, but Japan's vulnerabilities may not be any less, especially given China's near-monopoly position in rare earths that are vital to Japan. Regional economic and trade considerations. Both China and Japan are competing for access to resources, such as hydrocarbons and base metals. Bilateral tensions are raised every time a deal is struck, such as determining the route for the Russian oil pipeline serving Asia or awarding extraction rights. To avoid these negative consequences, both China and Japan should engage in constructive dialogue and seek to resolve the dispute through peaceful means. This can help to maintain peace and stability in the region and promote cooperation between the two countries. As we conclude our exploration of the Japan Navy facing off with Chinese ships near the Diaoyu Islands, the situation remains fluid. Stay tuned for updates as we continue to monitor developments. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and comment below with your thoughts. Subscribe for more in-depth analyses on pressing geopolitical issues. Until next time, stay informed.